it's Mrs. Gillum, and I'm the reading teacher at James Elementary and Trail Woods Elementary in the Kansas City Public School System. Today, I am here to share with you a good reader skill. Good readers focus on the character when they read. If you try to get to know the character in the story, you get more out of the story that the author is trying to tell you. So, good readers look at a character's traits on the outside, the ones you can see, and on the inside, the ones you can't see, the ones about the character's thoughts and words and the things that they do. Well, today we're going to look at the character traits inside the main character of the story. The story that I brought for you today is called Babushka's Doll. Now, this is a story about a little girl whose grandmother is from Russia. And the word Babushka means grandmother in Russian. So the characters in the story are the grandmother and the little girl Natasha. Now we are focused on the little girl. This is Babushka's Doll by one of my favorite authors, Patricia Polacco. It wasn't that Natasha was a truly naughty child. She just never understood why she had to wait for things. Babushka, Natasha said, for in Russian, Babushka means grandmother. Please stop doing the laundry and push me in the swing. My darlings, Babushka said, I have laundry first. Would you like to help me? No, said Natasha. I want to swing now. Here in the picture, we can see grandmother doing the laundry, and you can see Natasha saying no, she wants to swing right now. Aren't you finished yet? I want to go for a ride in the goat cart. My precious, Babushka said, I must hang up these clothes while the sun is shining. But the sun will be shining all day. I want to go now. Take me, said Natasha. So here is grandmother trying to get her work done, while Natasha tugs at her and demands that she come and do something now. Babushka went to feed the goats. Natasha followed. But I'm hungry too, Babushka. My stomach is making noises. I want to eat now. Don't be selfish, darling, said Babushka. These poor creatures need to be fed. They cannot fix their own lunch. There's Babushka. She's feeding the goats, feeding the animals, while Natasha holds her stomach because she's so hungry. Well, I'm going to stop right there at this point in the story, and I'm going to ask you, so far in the story, which trait is most like Natasha? Is she helpful? Is she helping her grandmother? Is she kind to her grandmother? Is she selfish? Or is she curious about what her grandmother is doing? What do you think? Do you think she is helpful, kind, selfish, or curious? Oh, well, why do you think that? What are her words or actions that are making you feel that she is whatever you picked off this list? I'll check back with you later on what you decided. Read a little more of this story. Now I am finished, said Babushka. Now we will have lunch. She took a little kettle down from a high shelf, and Natasha looked up where the kettle had been. "Is that your doll, Babushka?" she asked. "Yes, dear, it was my doll when I was a little girl like you." "Did you play with her all the time?" said Natasha. "No, dear, I only played with her once. Only once." Here in the picture, Natasha is pointing up at the shelf, and her and grandmother are looking at the doll, and grandmother has explained she only played with the doll one time. Can you imagine having a toy that you only played with one time? Well, Natasha's grandmother says she only played with the doll once. What happens next? "I have finished my soup now," said Natasha. "May I hold the little doll just for a while?" Babushka got the doll down from the high shelf. "Yes, it is just the right time for you to play with her," said Babushka. She handed the doll to Natasha. "I'm going to the store for groceries," she said. "You may play with the doll until I get back." And here's Babushka handing the doll over to Natasha. And Babushka is going to leave Natasha at home with the doll. And something is going to happen. As soon as the door closed behind Natasha's grandmother, something happened. The little doll began to move. She jumped to her feet and did a little dance. For a moment, Natasha was frightened, but then the doll called, "Come on, Tasha, let's go out and play." And there's the doll coming to life and asking Natasha to go out and play. Natasha and the doll ran and ran until Natasha could run no more. As soon as Natasha sat down to catch her breath, the doll said, "Get up, Tasha. You get up now. I want to play." And there they are, running and running until Natasha is so tired. "I'll swing you on the swing," Natasha said. "Whee!" the doll squealed. "Push harder. I want to go higher." Natasha pushed the doll higher and higher, but soon she grew tired. "Don't stop, Tasha," cried the doll. "Don't stop. I want you to swing me higher." And look at that. Natasha does not look very happy. She's pushing the doll as hard as she can, but the doll wants to go higher and higher. "I'll take you for a ride in the goat cart," Natasha said. "Oh, goody," Tasha the doll chirped. "And don't you slow down. Keep going as long as I want. Do you hear me? As long as I want." What do you think of this doll who's bossing her around and demanding to do all these different things? Does that remind you of anyone? Soon Natasha couldn't lead the goat cart any longer. "I have to stop," said Natasha. "I need to rest." "Now I want to eat," said the doll. Poor Natasha was very tired, but she tried her best to make some lunch. There's Natasha trying to rest and the doll saying, "I want to eat right now." Look at Natasha's face. She does not look very happy at all. Babushka's doll spilled the tea. She sloshed the soup from her spoon, and she flung noodles all over her head. Then she pounded her fist in the mess and laughed and laughed. So now Babushka's doll is making a horrible mess, and poor Natasha is all alone to deal with it. Suddenly, she stopped laughing and started to scream, "My dress! Tasha, it's all dirty! I want you to wash it right now!" Natasha washed the little dress and hung it on the line. There's Natasha washing the little dress. Then she ironed it and put it on the doll. "You didn't do it right," said the doll. "My dress is all wrinkled." Natasha began to cry. "I'm just a little girl," she said between sobs. "I wish you were just a doll." There's the crying Natasha, wishing that doll would stop demanding so many things. "My darling girl," a voice cried out. "Why are you crying, my precious child?" "Babushka," sobbed Natasha. "Your little doll came to life and she was very naughty. All she wanted me to do was work. She never let me rest. She made me iron her dress and I don't even know how. I'm just a little girl." There, Babushka said. "You must have had a bad dream." There's Natasha crying in the corner, and the doll is flopped on the floor, and Babushka is trying to console her and make her feel better. "Maybe," said Natasha. Her grandmother smiled and held Natasha closer. "From now on, you can play with the little doll anytime you want." "No, thank you, Babushka," Natasha said. "Once is enough." So in the end, Natasha doesn't want to play with the doll anymore. Why do you think that? Why do you think she doesn't want to play with the doll? I'll check in on that thinking in just a minute. Babushka picked up the little doll and put her back on the high shelf. "It looks like you've had quite a day," she said softly to the doll. The little doll gave Babushka a wink and went back to just being a doll. And the end of this story says that Natasha turned out different after she played with the doll. There is grandmother winking at the doll and putting her back on the shelf. So I'll ask you again, what did you decide was her character trait at the beginning? Was Natasha helpful, kind, selfish, or was she curious? How many of you chose selfish, always demanding that Grandma do things for her when Grandma was trying to work? And when Grandma asked her to be a helper, she said no. She wasn't helpful. She wasn't kind. She wasn't curious. She was selfish. But after she played with the doll, did Natasha learn a lesson in this story? What did she learn from the doll? Did she learn how it feels to be treated so rudely and not to have help and have things demanded done for you? So, do you think Natasha will change? And will she be different? Will she change her personality trait? So how might she change? Do you think she might become a little more helpful? Do you think she might be a little more kind and a little less selfish? I'm not sure if the story said anything about curious, but as a reader, taking the time to get to know Natasha through the way that she talked to her grandmother and the things that she did in the story helped me understand that this book is trying to teach a lesson. So what lesson did you learn from this story? Is it better to be helpful and kind and patient, or selfish? I bet you're making the right choice right now. Well, I really appreciate you sharing this time with me today to read this book called Babushka's Doll by Patricia Polacco. And the next time you see me, I will share more skills about what good readers do to become better readers. See you next time. Bye.
Kindergarten is great at Kansas City Public Schools.
I know they have really good teachers. I know this is a great school.
They teach them stuff that I thought my kids would never be able to know at the age of 5.
Since deciding to send our kiddos to a neighborhood school, we've become even more of a part of our community.
Now is the time to enroll your future kindergartner for the new school year. Visit enrollkc.org today.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
Hi, this is Miss Lu, and welcome again to Chinese for Beginners. Okay, so today we're going to learn about 颜色, colors. To begin with, like usual, we'll do a review of the things we learned last time. So last time we talked about the Chinese zodiac, the 12 zodiac animals. Let's do a review first, see if you can still remember how to say them in Chinese. Okay, together after me. 鼠 牛 虎 兔 鼠牛虎兔 and then 龙 蛇 马 羊 龙蛇马羊 猴 鸡 狗 猪 猴 鸡 狗 猪 Okay, so these are the 12 zodiac animals, and we also talk about the personalities of each zodiac. So I believe you already did your homework and see if they really match your personality in real life. Okay, so those are the 12 zodiac we talked last time, and today we're going to learn about colors. Okay, so our objective is I can name 9 colors in Chinese. And things you may need is still a notebook and a pencil to take notes. Okay, I'll give you about 10 seconds to get ready to learn. Okay, so to start with, 你喜欢什么颜色？你喜欢什么颜色？ Now I would like you to interact with me. Okay, so 你喜欢什么颜色？ What color do you like? Now we're going to say the 9 colors we're going to learn today, and I would like you to answer my question when I ask which the color you like it or not. Okay, let's start. 你喜欢红色吗？喜欢不喜欢 Okay, so interact with me and then answer it. 你喜欢红色吗？喜欢不喜欢你喜欢橙色吗？ If you cannot see the color clearly, it's the orange color. Okay, the color orange. 喜欢 不喜欢。你喜欢黄色吗？喜欢，不喜欢。你喜欢绿色吗？喜欢 or 不喜欢。你喜欢蓝色吗？喜欢，不喜欢。你喜欢黑色吗？喜欢 or 不喜欢。你喜欢紫色吗？喜欢 or 不喜欢。你喜欢白色吗？喜欢 or 不喜欢。你喜欢棕色吗？ If you cannot see clearly, it's the color brown. Okay, the color brown. 棕色。喜欢，不喜欢。Okay, so these are the 9 colors we're going to learn today, and I would like you to take notes of the pinyin, which is the alphabet of the colors. So when you are by yourself, you have notes to study over. Okay, so as we learn together, take notes. Okay, together with me. 红色，红色。红色 the color red 橙色橙色橙色 okay, so to make it more obvious, this is the color orange. Okay, the color orange 黄色黄色黄色 the color yellow绿色绿色绿色 the color green 蓝色蓝色蓝色 the color blue 紫色紫色紫色 the color purple. Okay, this is purple. And then 黑色黑色黑色 the color black. 白色白色白色 the color white. 棕色棕色棕色 is the color brown. Okay, and now let's do some practice. You may use your notes to help you when we do practice together. Okay, 这是什么颜色？这是什么颜色？ Okay, let's look together. I'll give you about 3 seconds for each slide. You can see it by yourself first, and then we'll check the answers together. Okay, 这是什么颜色？这是什么颜色？ If it's not clear on your screen, this is the color red. Okay, 这 how do you say red? 这是什么颜色？ Okay, 红色红色。这是什么颜色？ How do you say orange? 橙色橙色。这是什么颜色？ The color green is the color yellow is 黄色黄色。And this is the color green. Okay, 这是什么颜色？ How do you say the color green? 绿色绿色。And then this is color blue. Okay, color blue. 这是什么颜色？ 蓝色，蓝色。这是什么颜色？黑色，黑色。这是什么颜色？紫色，紫色 ，purple。OK。这是什么颜色？白色，白色。OK, the color white. 这是什么颜色 ？Brown. This is brown. OK. 棕色，棕色。Okay. So we learned how to see the colors and what are some meanings of colors in Chinese culture. So first, we all know that Chinese people like the color 红色 because we consider color 红色 as a lucky color. So especially for weddings or celebrations, you can see red all over the place, especially during the Chinese New Year time. The color red is used widely. But there's one taboo about the color 红色. We do not use a red color to write people's name in Chinese culture. So there are two stories about why we don't use red pen to write people's name. First is because in ancient time, the Chinese emperors, they will use red pen to give comments. So they consider red as the color that the emperor is using. So to respect him, people will not use the color red. But also there's another origin says that in ancient time, so people who are sentenced to death, their name will be written in red, in the color red. Okay, so that's like unlucky. So we don't use the color red to write people's names in Chinese culture. Okay, and then 白色, the color white. So different from Western culture, which 白色 is widely used on weddings. So 白色 in Chinese culture are widely used on funerals. Okay, and then 黄色, the color yellow. So the color is used in ancient time. Is used widely by the emperor and the royal family. So it symbolizes dignity and power. And then 黑色, 黑色 in Chinese culture symbolizes serious and justice. And then 绿色, green, so it symbolizes chivalry. And here's a fun fact to tell. So when you give gifts to your Chinese friends, do not give them a gift as a green hat as a gift, because a green hat in China means if someone cheated on you, then that person gave you a green hat. So you don't want to give a gift to your Chinese friend. You don't want to give them a green hat. Okay. And then colors. They are widely they can express the personalities, especially in Chinese operas. So Chinese opera, you can see there's dramatic use of colors in the faces of the characters. And as you can see, there's main color on each face, and this color can represent the main characteristic, the personality of the character. Okay, so for example, the color 红色, 红色. So symbols loyalty, brave, and positive characteristics. 黑色, justice, selfless, fair. 白色, the cunning, serious. 紫色, honorable, calm. 黄色, brave, fierce. And then gold is usually the color for God in Chinese operas. And then 绿色, lively, strong, chivalry. 蓝色, modest, dignified, and just. Okay, so here are the 9 colors we learned today. Let's go over together. 红色, 橙色, 黄色, 绿色, 蓝色, 紫色, 黑色、白色、棕色。Okay, and we also talk about the express of colors may express different personalities in Chinese opera. And here in this picture, as you can see, here are some opera masks made by my students. So some students created their own mask and using dramatic colors. So I would like you give you a homework, which is to make a Chinese opera mask. Okay, so please search and make a mask by yourself. You may create a mask, use different colors of your own choice. Okay, or you can just use the original ones, and then you will need to explain why you have the colors you used. Do some research about personality and the color in Chinese opera, and you're going to explain the use of the color and how they connect to the personality of your character to your audience. Okay, so above are our lesson for today. We learned about the colors and the meaning in Chinese culture, and also some opera mask related to personalities. And I hope you enjoyed our lesson for today. It's my pleasure to have you in my class, and I'll see you next time in World Languages.
Southeast because of the culture, the band program, and restorative justice.
I love Southeast because of the academics, sports, and students.
I love Southeast because of the people, the energy, and the advanced classes.
It's not alike. I love Southeast because the students here at Southeast are full of potential and they believe in achieving anything.
We are Southeast. Southeast. We stand shoulder to shoulder.
Join the Southeast family. Enroll today.
I chose manual because it's challenging and fun, and it can help me with college.
I chose manual because I wanted to get a jump start in my career with culinary arts.
I chose manual to acquire skills I'd use in real life.
I chose manual because I want to be an ER doctor, and being an EMT is my first step.
Kickstart your future today at Manual Career and Technical Center. Manual is open for all 11th and 12th grade students in both Kansas and Missouri. Learn more today at enrollkc.org/manual or call 816-418-5200.
Good morning. Welcome to KCPS Homeroom. My name is Paul Turner, Social Studies Coordinator for KC Public Schools. Today we're going to talk about the tensions rising in the colonies between the French and the English. Alright, what you need today is a pen and paper so we can get started. 1, 2, 3. Alright, today we're going to talk about the factors and the tensions led between the colonies in basically the new colonies. Then we're going to talk about how we explain how contact with Europeans devastated Native American civilization with disease and aggression. You guys are going to get introduced to basically George Washington. Prior to basically the colonies setting up, the way that they did, the English colony stopped basically east of the Appalachian Mountains. But they wanted to get west of the Appalachian Mountains to the Ohio River Valley. This is fertile land. This is great farming land. This is land basically that once the English controlled, they basically realized that they can get more money, more tax money from them, and they realized they can get more goods sent back to the old world. So we're going to get introduced to George Washington. This is Robert Denwoodle. Basically, he was the governor of Virginia. He sent George Washington, a 21-year-old captain. He sent him over to this area to deal with the French. It's the reason that George Washington loved Hamilton. Have you guys seen the film Hamilton? Or the play Hamilton, excuse me. Basically, this play, George Washington was reminded of himself in his youth when he dealt with Hamilton. So when he went over there, George Washington basically started a war at Fort Duquesne. This is the area where the war, basically, well, they're already fighting the 7 Years' War over in Europe. This is the area where the French and Indian War started. So, 1754, 20-year-old George Washington and 150 men went to Ohio River Valley. Washington attacked these French troops near Fort Duquesne. They killed the French leader. The French laid siege to Washington. Washington had a retreat with his men and a makeshift fort at Fort Necessity. Virginia surrendered. Again, this is that oomph, that manly, that aura that George Washington had, right? This is what reminded Hamilton of himself in his youth. So, Washington's actions in Ohio Valley started the French and Indian War, a conflict basically that spread globally as the 7 Years' War. So, we say that World War I technically happened in the 20th century. Actually, World War was actually being fought right then during this time frame between the French and the English, alright? So, 1754, Intercontinental Congress was held in Albany, New York, to discuss uniting the colonies against this French threat. So, what came out of this? This slogan that you see today, join or die, right? This is basically all the colonies, all the chopped up snake, right? Imagine if that snake united. So, the Albany Plan failed to unite the colonies. It failed to secure basically help with the Iroquois tribes. The first Intercontinental Congress cooperation was discussed. This was led by Ben Franklin. The British sent General Edward Braddock, basically an inexperienced, poorly armed and soldiers, basically eased the French in their defeat. So, Braddock, he came over to basically recruit all these troops from the colonies. We're not America yet. We're going to call them the colonies, okay? So, British were defeated in a series of attacks on the wilderness fronts as the native forces, along with the frontier, joined the French effort. You remember, the French and the natives, basically they were like alliances system out there. You remember if they switched over to Catholicism, these guys became part of the French citizens, correct? So, 3 years lasted. 3 years. 1757. William Pitt took control of the British effort and basically refocused the British attacks on Ohio Valley, from Ohio Valley to Quebec. So he knew going through Canada, if they could control the St. Lawrence River, they could basically win this war. So, Pitt took his efforts all the way up to Canada, and he focused on that effort. By 1758, the Louisburg fell to the British, opened up the St. Lawrence River to attack. By 1763, the Treaty of Paris gave Britain all of Canada and the Ohio Valley and almost the land east of the Mississippi River. So now, basically the British took out the French in North America. Great Britain became basically this preeminent power in the world, right? So what happens to the French in this new world? So Great Britain becomes this preeminent power in the world, right? Basically, the undisputed greatest power, especially in North America. British basically victory in North America led to conflicts among the British government and American colonists going forward, along with the Native Americans, right? So this is the British crown. What happens to the French? So the colonists, they started growing basically, they had this huge aura of confidence about themselves. They fought along the British, and basically they won a battle against the French. There's also a myth that the British basically were invincible. They realized that some of the British soldiers or the British generals that was coming over were poorly trained. So they started gaining more confidence in their abilities. So, William Pitt, his legacy in the United States, basically becomes Pittsburgh, right? So Pittsburgh is named after William Pitt. The colonists basically expanded their territory in North America. So, as Pitt forces basically realized that the North American territories basically going to belong to the British, Wolfe scaled basically cliff protections back in Quebec. They met with French troops on a plane. Abraham then died in the battle, right? So, now we have the British forces taking over North America. Again, when Montreal fell in 1760, by 1763, we had this huge Treaty of Paris. Again, the British forces basically now are the preeminent powers in the world. They're preeminent power in North America especially. So you see this territories, these original 13 colonies. They expanded. They expanded over basically west of the Appalachian Mountains. So now we have these colonists. They basically had this huge confidence, this huge aura. They started feeling mistreated basically by the British crown. These colonists were not loyal to the British crown. Remember this. Remember why most people come over, right? Religious persecution, an opportunity to build wealth, basically a great sense of adventure. North America provided that for these colonists. So when that happened, basically they felt basically slighted and disrespected by the British crown. These forces started gaining this power of saying maybe we basically should be independent of basically the British crown. The British were frustrated with the colonists. They refused to fight and trade. They refused to fight, but they continued to trade with the French and Native American enemies, as they called them. The French and Indian War basically showed the colonists throughout the spectrum of the geography that the barriers of unity began melting away. They realized they had one common enemy. That common enemy is basically going to be the British crown. So, as we start advancing about 10 to 15 years going forward, we start seeing this dissent. We start seeing these colonists rebelling against this crown. They realized that their future lay within themselves. They realized that the British crown maybe didn't have their best interests laid ahead. So, let's go back to some of our questions that we asked in the beginning. I want you guys to answer. How did contact with Europeans devastated the Native American civilization due to disease and aggression? We already talked about the impact of the English coming over, how they treated them, right? We already talked about the way the French treated their Native American counterparts. They built an alliance system, correct? Now we can throw the aggression in. We can talk about the French and Indian War. Basically the impact that led. Basically taking over Native American lands. We're going to talk about Pontiac's Rebellion basically in our next lecture. That's going to continue this whole process leading up to the basically American Revolution and basically America becoming its own colonies. So this is what I want you guys to do. While you guys are out there, I want you to basically start making some assumptions going forward. What happens 10 to 15 years down the road? What do you think happens basically to this sense of American society? Well, how about this colonial society? Do we have the sense of a this national idea of who we are? Do we have this national culture? Or is we still basically rule still these 13 little colonies by ourselves? My name is Paul Turner. I thank you for joining me with KCPS Homeroom. See you guys next week.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists, and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
I love Southeast because of the culture, the band program, and restorative justice.
I love Southeast because of the academics, sports, and students.
I love Southeast because of the people, the energy, and the advanced classes.
It's not alike. I love Southeast because the students here at Southeast are full of potential and they believe in achieving anything.
We are Southeast. We stand shoulder to shoulder.
Join the Southeast family. Enroll today.
Hello, my name is Paul Turner, Social Studies Coordinator, KCPS Homeroom. Today, we're going to talk about Reconstruction. Last week, we talked about Reconstruction, basically how it got started and the effects of African American free population. Now we're going to talk about the politics of Reconstruction. We're going to bring up certain legal and constitutional issues that arose from basically the Civil War. What should be done with the free black population? One of the questions that we answered on last week. How and when should the southern states be reintegrated basically back to the Union? And what should be done with Jefferson Davis and other Confederate leaders? And what led to Reconstruction? Was it a failure or was it a success? On whose part? Our learning objective. We're going to explain what were the success and what were the failures of Reconstruction. This is Jefferson Davis, guys. We talked about him last week. After the death of Abraham Lincoln, the vice president became the president. What we know about Jefferson Davis? He was the only Southern senator basically not to leave the Union during the Civil War. So, this basically was an attempt when he became part of the ticket to basically keep the country together. What do we know about Jefferson Davis? Lincoln picked him because he was the only senator from the South not to leave the Union during the Civil War. As a vice president, Lincoln was trying to bridge the country back together, so he picked him for his vice president. He was basically a true Southern gentleman. He did not believe that basically African Americans deserved the rights that they got during this movement. He basically canceled all the gains during the Reconstruction effort once he became the president. We'll discuss this. Also, as we move forward, we start seeing the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. Again, these guys are basically the old bourgeoisie of basically of the American South. They didn't like the rights that African Americans was gaining. The right to vote. So basically, they started leading political office. Basically, this irritated a lot of the men in the South. So again, these are basically our congressional representatives during Reconstruction from many southern states. Again, a lot of African Americans. So, Southern whites hated this term called scallywags. They accused the Northern basically politicians of profiting from basically Reconstruction. They thought this just basically was plundering the Southern treasures during Reconstruction. Scallywags is defined as Northern Republicans during Reconstruction, often put personal profit above the country. The term is used divisively in the white Southern Democrats who oppose Reconstruction legislation. Southern whites hated the political active blacks that outranked them. Again, this even happened in the Republican Party. As you can see, this is an old political cartoon where you see the treasures basically of a scallywag and basically a carpetbagger stealing from the South. Carpetbaggers, basically, this is a person from the North seeking power and wealth in a war-torn South. You remember, after the Civil War, the South's economy was basically devastated. Cotton was basically at the bottom because now European powers started going to Egyptian cotton, which is softer and feels better on your skin compared to American cotton. And you see these people who are basically rise of the KKK. They basically started seeing people from Ohio, people from New York as basically the enemies of the American South. So, let's talk about the KKK. 1866, extremely racist, basically former Confederates founded the Invisible Army of the South, aka the KKK. Their job was to basically scare blacks, not from voting or seeking jobs. Often used violence and terror. They were started in Pulaski, Tennessee. Here are the two prominent leaders of it, Nathaniel Bedford Forrest and George Gordon. How did we get here? And again, it starts with leadership. You had many people basically exposing these thoughts and these ideas of the Ku Klux Klan. How did we get here again? It starts with leadership. Andrew Johnson came from a very humble background. This is basically his house that he grew up in. Very small, right? He wasn't these elite politicians basically that you saw from Virginia. You know, he wasn't his elite politician that you saw from New York. He comes from a small cabin, right? This is where he was born. This is where he was raised. A very humble background. He served many years in Congress. Again, he was the only Southerner not to leave Congress during succession. So, this basically helped him gain part of the ticket when he ran with Abraham Lincoln in his last term. When Lincoln was killed, he ascended to become the President of the United States. A quote, "The better class of them, meaning blacks, will go to work and sustain themselves, and the class ought to be allowed to vote on the grounds that their loyal Negro is more worthy than a disloyal white man." So he was spending his thoughts of basically why blacks should have the right to vote with the 13th Amendment. He supported states' rights and a strict interpretation of the Constitution. He believed that the Constitution should be the law of the land and shouldn't evolve over time. He never earned the trust of the North and never regained the confidence of the South. So he didn't have any real support, especially when it came to Congress. When it came to Congress, most congressmen, did not trust Johnson. They thought he'd do anything and everything to basically get the votes. So people didn't trust him. That's going to come basically to haunt him here in a few years. Before Lincoln died, Lincoln never officially recognized Southern secession. So legal restoration in his eyes was basically simple. Lincoln supported basically a 10% plan. Southern states to reintegrate basically when 10% of the state's population pledged an oath to the Union and recognized emancipation for slaves. So again, we talked about this in our last discussion. You remember some of these basically these old slave owners, they were trying to redo slavery, right? But with Lincoln's plan, you had to recognize the emancipation of slaves. What happens to our border states, such as states of Missouri, states of Kentucky, states who never left the Union but are still slave-holding states? That's a question that we need to answer. Radical Republicans like Thaddeus Stevens feared that Lincoln was too lenient, basically, on the southern states to enslave blacks again. So again, these are our states, our border states, slave-holding states that never left. These are our states that basically were slave-holding states that basically left the Union. Thaddeus Stevens, here's the man. He said that this plan was too lenient and basically will force bondage back on the free African population. So, he came up with a compromise in Congress, the Wade-Davis bill. He demanded 50% rather than 10%. Lincoln vetoed that bill before he died. When Johnson took over, he supported Lincoln's moderate policies. Again, Congress did not trust him. 1865, President Johnson declared the South satisfied all conditions so they could come back into the Union. Again, a Southern man, basically with Southern ideas. This come back to haunt him again. He repeatedly vetoed Republican-supported bills of extensions of the Freedom Bureau, the Civil Rights Bill, ending the black codes in the South. He thought that the Southern states did enough to come back into the Union. Again, the black codes were a precursor to Jim Crow laws that lasted all the way to the 1960s. Johnson began a series of roundtables, of speeches, hoping to reduce the numbers of Republican victors in the upcoming election. But this was a mistake. Johnson was often heckled by an audience. He responded with mudslinging, which backfired. Anytime a politician starts mudslinging, it tends to backfire on him. because most of these guys are not clean and have passed themselves. So, Republicans actually gained seats in this next election and had veto-proof 2/3 majority in both the Senate and the House. So now, Johnson had no power as president. If he vetoed a law, they had basically veto-proof majorities in both the House and Senate to get the law passed. So, moving forward, now we have certain legal and constitutional issues arisen after the war. Again, Johnson's use of the veto is one of those constitutional issues. Again, what should be done with the free blacks? Now that both the Republicans in the House and the Senate have basically veto-proof majorities, what happened to some of those laws that got vetoed under Johnson previously? How and when should the Southern states reintegrate? Again, now Congress got this huge majority in both the House and the Senate. So should they take over basically the integration of the South? So we're going to call that radical? Crap.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Let's go back there.
Alright. I'll start asking these questions again.
Alright, yep. Alright, here we go. 3, 2.
Now we have certain constitutional and legal issues started rising after the war. Now we're doing Reconstruction. Now we're starting to do Johnson's use of the veto. Now we start seeing these Republican majorities, 2/3 in both the House and Senate. So now that becomes a constitutional issue. What should be done with free blacks after the war? Remember, all these states started enacting these black codes, right? These are precursors to basically Jim Crow laws. And this basically lasts on to basically the 1960s. How and when should Southern states be reintegrated? Does basic Congress take over basic Reconstruction, or do they still allow the president to do so? So now we're starting to deal with some of these issues. Alright, so we still have to decide what should be done with the leaders of the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis is still alive, but he's in jail. What should be done with him? Should he have the right to vote? Alright, so now we have to create an argument that should lead to Reconstruction. Should Congress or the president be in control? So, as we go through the radical Reconstruction, we're going to basically answer all those questions that come forward. We're dealing with now a new president, basically on the opposite side of the spectrum. I want you guys to start thinking about some ideas, some questions for next week. I want you guys to realize that now you're dealing with 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate. Can they remove the president? Again, that becomes a constitutional issue, right? So, think about that question when we meet again next week, 9 o'clock, here at KCPS Homeroom. My name is Paul Turner, Social Studies Coordinator, KC Public Schools. Talk to you guys next week.